John Bolton appears to be a victim of the new anti-war power base in America. We'll be live at the UN headquarters in New York. I'm Julia McDonald.
And I'm Imran Garda. This is Al Jazeera live from Doha. Also on the programme, a mother's grief in Lebanon after a protester is shot dead in the street.
Plus 40 years in prison for a US Marine found guilty of rape in the Philippines.
And the battle to beat one of the world's biggest killers, malaria. We have a special report from West Africa.
Welcome to the programme. The United States' outspoken and controversial ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, has resigned.
He was a leading conservative and would have been unable to continue in the job after January because George Bush's Republican Party has lost control of Congress in the recent elections.
Michael Sullivan reports now on his role in America's foreign policy and what made him such a controversial figure.
It deepens suspicions about the United Nations that will lead many to conclude that the organization is incapable of playing a helpful role in the region.
John Bolton's summary appointment by President Bush as United States ambassador to the United Nations met with fierce opposition from members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
Some have said that sending you to New York would be like sending Nixon to China. I'm concerned it'll be more like sending a bull into a china shop.
I have spent the last month extensively reviewing your writings, your public statements about the United Nations. And my overall assessment, Mr. Bolton, is that you have nothing but disdain for the United Nations.
An arch-conservative, he was installed by President Bush while the Senate was in recess, to the dismay of many member states and moderates in the United States government and Congress. Senate confirmation of his temporary appointment has been stalled for months. He runs out of time at the end of the year, and his resignation comes before that point is reached.
He has been exceptionally skillful diplomat at the United Nations at a time when the UN faced very challenging issues like reform.
Diplomatic appreciation for John Bolton, but 15 months after entering the United Nations building to be welcomed by the Secretary-General, John Bolton follows his fellow Conservative Donald Rumsfeld out of the White House administration. Another setback for the President, who appointed them for their pugnacious style in promoting his policies in Iraq and defending them in a disapproving United Nations. Michael Sullivan, Al Jazeera.
Let's go live to New York City and join Al Jazeera's Mark Seddon. Mark, is this the changing face of US foreign policy?
Indeed it is, Imran. It's not so much by design, by consequence, really. President Bush is very disappointed that John Bolton is not going to be reaffirmed. And I think John Bolton essentially felt he had to go because the Senate would likely have pushed him. So, yes, mixed reactions here in New York. Mark Malloch Brown, Kofi Annan's number 2, said wryly today, no comment with a smile. That kind of sums up, I guess, the feeling at the United Nations.
Any talks on who could possibly be his replacement?
Well, too early to tell, but I think what we can probably say is that because of the power shift in the Senate and Congress, there's likely to be a much more emollient figure, somebody who's more diplomat than politician, perhaps. And somebody, as a result of the Baker Commission report expected later this week, who may take a slightly different attitude towards Iraq and issues in the Middle East. So that's certainly what many Democrats will be hoping for.
Yes, you mentioned he was quite a character. What do you think epitomized his tenure at the UN?
Well, the fact that he didn't seem to believe in the United Nations. He said on one occasion there is no such thing as the United Nations. I mean, essentially, John Bolton was a neoconservative before neoconservatives were really ever thought of. He was a student campaigner for Barry Goldwater back in 1964. He has a track record of standing up very strongly for the things he believes in, and certainly on arms control there will be his supporters in the UN saying, well, look, he was the one who took a tough stand against North Korea and Iran, for instance. But his detractors will say, well, all very well, but under his tutelage, or on his brief, if you like, North Korea became a nuclear weapon state, and Iran may be becoming one. So a lot of controversy surrounds John Bolton. He's very media savvy, and I'm sure he's going to be saying some very interesting things now he's free of the organisation.
We look forward to hearing those interesting things. Mark Seddon, thanks very much from New York.
Lebanon has sent more troops to Beirut after the killing of a pro-Syrian Muslim, heightened fears of sectarian violence. Ahmed Mahmoud was shot dead in the Sunni neighbourhood on Sunday as he returned from protests in central Beirut.
Hezbollah and its allies say the sit-in in Martyrs Square will continue until the government of Fuad Sinora is brought down. Our correspondent Zaina Khudr is there.
Maryam Mahmoud still cannot believe that she lost one of her sons. The first fatality, a bystander caught in Lebanon's latest political crossfire. Ahmed was only 22 years old when he was shot as opposing groups clashed in a Beirut neighborhood. And this was his most recent photo, wearing the Lebanese army uniform before completing his mandatory military service. They gathered to bury him in what is known as the Graveyard of Martyrs in the southern suburbs of Beirut. While his family are supporters of the Shiite movement Amal, they say Ahmed never belonged to any faction. Suddenly, the news came. The funeral would be postponed.
Tomorrow the funeral will be held at 12 noon. This is what we were told.
The opposition, Shiite leaders Hassan Nasrallah and Nabi Berri, leading a campaign, an open-ended sit-in in downtown Beirut, to oust the government of Prime Minister Fuad al-Sinura. There were angry words here. Mourners blamed Sinura for the tensions.
The street is unhappy. You know, there is blood in the street, and this is what was looking for. The problems to be democratic problem. We talk and they will talk, and we leave it as it is. There is not any. We don't want to use guns.
It was here in this neighborhood where Ahmed was shot. Sunday's clashes between rival Muslim groups was not an isolated incident. A number of skirmishes have been taking place over recent days, raising fears of more sectarian violence. The army was out in force to contain further violence in this predominantly Muslim Sunni area. Shiites live here as well. Residents insist those who started the clash were not from this area, and they do not fear inter-Muslim violence, at least not among their neighbors.
Ahmed was our friend, even though he was a Shiite. We were smoking a water pipe earlier the day before the clashes.
Ahmed's brother is finding comfort among his Sunni neighbors. These young boys may have different political views, but right now they are putting those divisions aside and dealing with the death of their friend. Zaina Khudr, Al-Jazeera, Beirut.
Egypt's Interior Ministry says it's arrested members of an international organisation recruiting people to carry out attacks in Iraq and other countries. Well, we can join Al Jazeera's Amar El-Kaki in Cairo. Amal, what do we know about these men and their plans?
Julie, the statement from the Interior Ministry says they arrested 9 Frenchmen, 2 Belgians, 1 American, an undisclosed number of Egyptians, Syrians and Tunisians. It's quite bizarre, of course, of citizens from different countries all over the world. And it also says that these people have links with terrorist organizations abroad. It did not specify the whereabouts of arresting them, whether in Cairo or outside Cairo. But what we know is that they have confiscated documents and organizational literature. And they said they were recruiting people, convincing them of practicing jihad by going to Iraq and carrying out attacks in Iraq and throughout the countries of the region. Till that point, these are the details that we have received in a fax from the Interior Ministry. No more details are in yet, but we'll keep an eye on that. But it is amazing that this coincides with a big campaign that the Egyptian police is launching in the Sinai Peninsula.